It didn't strike me that existence is profoundly mysterious. And I have memories of having conversations about that with my father when I was very, very young, like 8 or 9. And I couldn't, it seemed like all the grown-ups were in some sort of coma. Like they were all pretending they knew what was going on. And nobody seemed to know what was going on, or what this is, or what you should do with it. And everyone seemed to be involved in what seemed to my young mind as trivia. And that culminated in sitting on a hill which overlooks this sleepy town in the southwest of England where I grew up with my dog. I was sitting there like I often did, and something happened for the first time, and I had what I now think of as a deep awake experience, where I was in a completely different state.
Welcome, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I do intuitive writings, automatic writings, and a lot of the stuff that comes in are very similar to what you talk about. So I want to kind of expand on that and dive deeper into it and what your thoughts are on it. Because you do have a different perspective towards spirituality and a lot of things that maybe we don't look at quite right. And you term it as like turning it upside down, or it is upside down and you're turning it upside right. So I kind of want to dive into some of those topics. But before we get into that, can you go over a little bit about your background, what brought you into the work that you're doing? Did you have any spiritual experiences?
Yeah, I mean, the whole journey has been about spiritual experience, really. There's two sides to my work and also my personal journey, which is experiential on the one side and philosophical on the other, because ideas without, unless they turn into experience, aren't much use to you, and experiences need to be understood. If you don't understand them right, you can end off heading down some bizarre track. And there's a lot of the history of religions and cults full of people having spiritual experiences with what I would say is not such good ideas now, and you end up somewhere you don't want to end up. So it all started for me, Laura, very young. I cannot remember a time at all where it didn't strike me that existence is profoundly mysterious. And I have memories of having conversations about that with my father when I was very, very young, like 8 or 9. And I couldn't, it seemed like all the grown-ups were in some sort of coma. Like they were all pretending they knew what was going on. And nobody seemed to know what was going on, or what this is, or what you should do with it. And everyone seemed to be involved in what seemed to my young mind as trivia. And that culminated in sitting on a hill which overlooks this sleepy town in the southwest of England where I grew up with my dog. I was sitting there like I often did, and something happened for the first time. And I had what I now think of as a deep awake experience, where I was in a completely different state. And at that stage, I'd say the most noticeable thing to me, because I wrote about it afterwards, I was just 12, almost 13, was love. Just this enormous love, enormous, enormous, enormous love. And that really set me off. I knew something incredibly profound had happened. It didn't last. Um, uh, I don't know how long it lasted. Probably not very long. I didn't write that down. But I certainly carried on being a teenager with all of the things of being a teenager. But I was looking now for what was that? How can I have it again? How can I go deeper? And because of my particular nature, how can I share it with others? And I've really been doing all of that ever since. And here I am now, 67. And so it's been, whatever that is, 55 years of doing it. Crazy. And it hasn't eased up. The experience keeps deepening, keeps changing, keeps evolving. And my understanding of it also has kept evolving. And at a certain point in my 30s, I started writing, and have written 35 books on all of the spiritual traditions of the world, basically taking what's often called a perennialist view, a perennial philosophy view, which is, hang on, they're all saying something quite similar, aren't they? And they're all talking about this deep awake experience or awakening experience. Um, and so what I was doing was going through Zen, Sufism, Christianity, blah, 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 going, look, there's more people going, look, it's all love and it's all one and blah, blah, blah. Um, and that first phase of my writing was very. I learned a great deal by experiencing again, and also learning about philosophically about all of these different esoteric traditions, and that led me, whenever it was, probably beginning of this millennium, to a shift whereby I thought, you know what, I don't want to write about what people have said in the past. I want to see how we can reinvigorate this perennial wisdom for the 21st century. So I set out to do my best to contribute to that and wrote a number of books which I think really did capture this vision, ancient vision, in a new way that worked, which was great. And I'm very proud of those books. However, honestly, I think I got it so clear for myself, I started to see what was wrong with it. And that's what's led me to this last phase since probably 2013, whereby I found myself questioning the very basics of my understanding and being willing to shift dramatically in how I saw things. And that's led me to, like as you said in the introduction, to a radically different perspective to the one I had, which to me is much, much better. And it's affected my experience. So the experience of that love has stayed the same. It's still the most important thing. I've just finished a retreat running an event here in Glastonbury where I am. And it's just the level of that deep awake love is just extraordinary, just unbelievable for everyone, every single
Mm-hmm.
person. But, or as well, the way I experience it now and the way I experience the deep awake state has itself evolved through a different understanding. So here I am at the ripe old age of 67, and it's the most exciting it's ever been. I can't believe it, because it's just moving and changing and evolving, and I can't keep up. It's like every day. So that's how I've got there, from that kid at 12 on this hill going, what the hell is this? To this old guy going, yeah, I've done all this stuff, but I'm not sure I was right. Now let's rethink it.
Beautiful, beautiful journey. I love how it unfolds. And it's been my experience too, like as we've kind of gone through the past, in the different religions, different thought systems, they all are kind of saying the same thing, but in different verbiage. And that's interesting. And it's like coming from it at a different perspective, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they're not able to term it the right way or trying to explain it, but there is a lot of different ways to explain it because I'm not really big into religion. I haven't really dove into a lot of things like you have, like in depth. There were short spurts of time where I was married into Catholic, but I didn't really go and dive into it. I lived in a Buddhist center for 5 years, but I didn't do a lot while I was in there. you know, I caught on to certain things. I wasn't really deep into the studies of different religions. However, with that being said, I noticed there were some underlining core things, and I've had a near-death experience, out-of-body experience. I had Kundalini, awakening your dark night of the soul. So I've been through a lot just on my own personal experience, and this is kind of where I get it from. And I kind of agree with you. I feel like it's more authentic to get it from our own personal experience. And though other people's experiences help to confirm that, I like to try and get it directly for myself. And so I do automatic writings, and a lot of the automatic writings do kind of talk about everything. I came in knowing that I was going to be learning more beyond what our everyday life was. And the person who took up my mother's role, they said, oh, well, I don't know. They looked at me dumbfounded, kind of like you said. It was like they were in a whole different world. Like I was trying to talk to them about it. And I just knew I was going to be learning about more stuff than, okay, you go to school, you go to work, you come home, you go to bed. Life isn't, there's much more behind life than that, right? And so she's just dumbfounded about what I was trying to talk to her about. And she said, well, maybe next year in school, maybe next year in school. And every year I would go to school thinking that's where I would learn it. And so then I got tired, of asking the question because nothing was happening, or so I thought. But it was more of an unfolding through the years because things were happening that I couldn't make sense of, right? I had experiences from the other side, what people might call spirit or just knowing, things like that. Things were happening without me really realizing it, but I was noticing it. And then
Yeah.
finally, 2009, I started going in through this dark night of the soul, and like from there, my journey just kind of took off. So it was like an unfolding, right? So it's not something I feel is like an ongoing, immediate thing or sporadic. It's like going on the whole time. We just don't recognize certain things until they come into our awareness. It sounds like you were kind of on the same journey. You knew from a child, and then as it kind of folded, it kind of just becomes more and more.
Yeah. 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 I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
I think of, when people ask me, what do you mean by a spiritual experience? And there's so many different ways to answer that. But the simplest way that I answer it now is to go, I think the simplest version of a spiritual experience is when you go, there's more going on here, isn't there, than our socio-biological lives. Not that our social biological lives aren't amazing. They are absolutely amazing. I think they're incredible. But what happens to anyone that begins that journey is at some point something happens and they go, hang on, there's something else going on here, isn't there? And that starts to unfold a whole new level of what it is to be a human.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think it's we come in with that knowing, or do you think it's just part of the journey we come to that knowing,
I
and then
think
it folds?
I think it can be both.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think it can be both. So, I think for some of us, it's like the beginning of that is a remembering. I hope that we carry on and discover things we didn't know before. But I think there is a recapping. I do take the idea of transmigration or reincarnation seriously. I think it we can understand that in a reasonable, rational way. Um, I think it's a shame. I mean, a lot of my work that I've been doing for the last 20 years has been really looking for a way to integrate spiritual information, let's call it, which addresses, I think, a level of reality. It's not some, and increasingly, I don't think it's a supernatural reality. I think it's part of the natural world, which has evolved like everything else. So I want to find a way of going, look, there's key parts of the human experience which we're in danger of dismissing because they look like they're kind of, well, woo woo is the insult word, isn't it, that people use? It's kind of nonsense, it's irrational. Now, I get that because a lot of spirituality is not very reflective, meaning people don't question themselves that much. It's like, well, I've had this experience, this is what's real. And it's like, okay, we need to do more than that. But if we can reflect and question it, and I think there's a way of understanding those things, like the survival of death, like reincarnation, like awakening, which can be just as rational. And rational is it's a word that gets bad press. All it really means is having a good reason. Well,
Mm-hmm.
your experience in spiritual states is a good reason. It may not be enough on its own, but it's a start. And there are good reasons. And as you know, for instance, you had a near-death experience. The fact that we've now collated hundreds of thousands of near-death experiences is a good reason to go, something's happening. We don't know what, but something's happening. And the first step, I think, is to go, well, maybe what's happening is what people say is happening. Let's start there. Let's not start with, well, that's impossible. It can't be that. It must be something else. Let's start with, maybe these people are describing what happened. And so what I want to do is I want to go, look, our scientific knowledge, which just allows us to speak across continents right at this moment, is phenomenal. And it's arisen through what? Through deep questioning of assumed things. The great scientists of the few hundred years ago, they grew up with a whole load of Christian dogmas and they questioned them. Really, did the earth get formed 4,000 years ago? Well, I'm not sure. Now we know it's, looks like 14 billion years for the universe to be formed. Uh, and we need to do the same with spirituality. We need to question it, but we mustn't lose it. And the danger is it gets lost because it's not taken seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's those little sparks or those insights or whatever you want to call it, intuition or inner guidance that kind of brings me to it. And it's like, oh, well, that makes sense, because I get clarification even when I'm not sitting down and doing automatic writing or anything like that, like I could just be out one day and have this question arise. And I feel like I have this dialogue that goes on within me that I'm observing. And it helps me to bring in the question answer to it, the perspective that shifts consciousness, right? So, for instance, part of my waking after the near death experience was one of my teachers came in to teach me about meditation. And then shortly after that was yoga. And here I'm like, okay, what is yoga and meditation really? So, and I'm trying to write a book and put everything in it about my journey and my writings that I get. And so I wanted to understand what is really meditation and yoga, right? And what came to me was like, it's the movement of listening yourself from the body, creating this space, right? Because you're listening your self detachment to your mind to have that space for information to come in, right? And then also from the body, you're detaching yourself from the body and the movements because it's like solid and rigid. And so it helps me bring in those little nuggets of information. So it's really interesting. Like we have to dive deeper and question,
Yes,
what's really going
yes,
on.
yes, exactly. And that openness, that was the word that I would use, whereby you can only see something new if you're open to going beyond what you see at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that so any evolution is absolutely essential to that, and practices, many esoteric practices help with that. Although they often come with a very rigid set of ideas, which are not questioned. And it astonishes me, having found myself, I mean, I wrote books being critical of religion, fundamentalism particularly, when I was younger. So I interacted with a lot of fundamentalists. What's been interesting about now, where I'm actually going to a lot of spiritual folk, look, I think we got it up the wrong way, consider this, is that they are very much like fundamentalists. Their reaction is very similar. It's like, it's not like, oh really, tell me about it. It's like, no, you're wrong. And I may be wrong, of course. I could, it's like the likelihood is I'm wrong. When someone comes out and says something different to everyone else, it's likely they're wrong, except every now and then they're actually right. And that's where the new thing comes from. So we need that openness, and in ourselves. But what I see with spirituality, and it is the hardest thing, I think, is to be able to take one's own experience and realize it's not authoritative. So everything I get for my philosophy comes through intuition, exactly the same. I walk, I'm working on a problem, and then an insight comes, just like you describe, and I go, wow, that's really working. And then I follow it, and it goes. But part of that is to deeply question it. And if you jump to the scientific community for a moment, which is a very different community in some respects, and you take the giant of that community, Albert Einstein, he said the same thing. So his idea that gravity is the warping of space-time, which is a pretty weird idea to most people, but seems to be the best idea we've got, came to him like that. He says it's all intuition. But intuition was just the first step. The next step was, okay, intuition feels like it's the best processing I've got. It's not infallible. It's not authoritative. It's limited by me, but it's the best I've got. And then that means that some of it is really like, yeah, follow that, and others, no. And being able to tell that apart requires the ability to go that just because I had this experience and went, I'm sure that, blah, 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 doesn't mean it's actually true. And that's a hard shift for people because,
Mm-hmm.
and it's what keeps everyone separate. In what's great about the scientific community is it's one community. They disagree, and profoundly, but nevertheless, there's a feeling of they need to interact because they're looking for the truth. Whereas in spirituality, I live in a spiritual center here, not in my home, but in the town. It's a very spiritual town. And it's very ghettoized, I often think. Sometimes each individual has got their own little thing going. And that's fine because we're individuals and we should. That's really healthy. But we need to interact with an openness to work together to find the best way of understanding the near-death experience, for example, or the awakened state, or just the nature of reality.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I found that when I went through like visiting the different religions, that they were very closed off. And I have this, I don't know, I kind of reject the religions, because like you try to talk to them about certain things, or whatever the case, and none of it really resonated. I was only in each one, like Methodist, Protestant, um, Catholic, for a few months there. So, but I realize that they are very kind of closed off and they don't really allow for room for any other awarenesses that come in. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of people would, like you said, it keeps us separate. They've done really bad things in life, to others just because of their belief systems. And it's not very productive, I don't think, you
To
know.
me, Laura, it's like, look, what we've learned 100 years ago, I think human beings had one of the biggest ideas that any human being has ever had, which is that the universe is not a thing, it's a process. That everything is a process of evolution. The whole universe, not just life, but the whole universe has evolved. Well, spiritual folks have had a sense of the evolving soul for quite a long time. The key thing for me is the evolving soul is the leading edge
Mhm.
of a process that included the evolution of physics, the evolution of biology, and now the evolution of the soul. And it's all one process. And part of that means the evolution of our understanding. So anything which goes, well, our understanding's arrived, it's this, it's in this book, it's defined, that's the end of it, is immediately counter to actually the nature of existence, which is the constant reinvention, just like every moment's a reinvention. Every moment arrives, it's something new, it's never happened before. And it comes from the past, what has happened before.
Right.
So that's what our ideas need to keep track with, that the very thing we're trying to understand is itself evolving. And we evolve when we harness that, when we become
Mhm.
in tune with that evolution.
Right, because it's almost like taking, let's say, a bottle, you put a cap on it, source or our souls or spirit, whatever you want to call it, God, it can evolve through that when you put a cap on it, right? So you have to take it off and let it through, flow through, right? And that was part of how what they showed me is like you can't receive if you're not going to be open, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's
that's
it.
kind of where I've worked on myself, meditating every day, tuning in, going in nature, connecting, and just allowing the experience to flow through, not being so rigid, in my life, So,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
now I do want to
Well
talk
done.
about a couple of topics.
Yeah.
One of the first things that came in for me to have an understanding about what life is, right? So I took a Shakespeare course in college. And so a lot of times my information will come in things that's in my experience, my life, my person experience, such as taking the course. And the example they gave me to start with was life is a play, right?
There's a
And
play.
that's how I got the concept, okay, that makes sense. And so I dove deeper into that. Now, what really is that, right? And so it kind of gave me a synopsis of what we're doing here. So, how would you explain life? Like, would you agree with that scenario?
Um, well, I would have if you'd spoken to me 15 years ago. One of my books is a satirical gospel called the Gospel of the Second Coming, which is exactly about not a play in that analogy, but like a novel or a story, and we're all characters in the story, and there's a big mind which is the author. My later work was all about it's a kind of dream, and that's a very old idea. Goes back to India. This is the dream of Brahman. It's the dream of God, and it's like our dreams, except it's God's dream. I see it differently now. I think those things are insightful, but they need to find their right place. So, if I take the dream analogy, I would say not that life is a dream, but that in a way life has evolved into a dream. By which I mean, physics is physics, biology is biology, but the psyche, the word psyche means soul. It's the same word. One's from psyche is Greek, soul is from a Germanic root. They're talking about this thing we're experiencing right now, which is non-material, that whole domain. in which we dream, in which we create whole images, stories. We can go off into ayahuasca experiences or whatever the hell you're doing. There's a big whole domain of soul. And that's the latest thing which has arisen in this process of evolution. And I think that's impacting life. So all of the levels, the physical level in which things fall when you drop them, the level in which we're alive and die and sense the world, and then this other level of non-material level, that level is like a dream, which is what I think is happening in the near-death experience. You're entering into a communal dream. That's what the Tibetans called the bardos. These different states you can enter into, very vivid, very amazing, the most evolved level, I think, of reality, which is what we're entering into. It's the after-death state. But that's also impacting on our everyday state, so that there are moments where life, most of life, probably for most of us, is fairly pedestrian. You know what's going to happen, things work out. And then there are periods or events which are utterly magical. What Carl Jung called synchronicities happen, or just straightforward magic. You intend something and it happens, and you can enter into a state where those just happen, like, wow, what's going on? That's where the dreamlike nature is beginning to impact on the biological and physical level. So they're all interacting, I think. So life has become magical. Physics isn't magical. It's amazing, but it's not magical. The magical level has evolved from it and interacts with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, I know we kind of have like the scenarios. I think it's the verbiage, trying to find the right verbiage to really explain it. So I liked how you kind of explained that. Now, what about like identity and the human's role, like in our existence? So although people are trying to, like, okay, so that's your identity, that's your ego, they're trying to escape their ego, their identity, but I feel like it's an important part, right? Because it's part of the whole. Where do you
Yes,
feel like that fits
I,
in?
I, I completely agree with that, Laura. And my ideas about identity have radically transformed. So there's a common idea. The whole thing with the ego. The ego just means the I. What the Latin is referring to. Often it gets confused because we can use it sometimes in a more sort of ethical context to talk about being egotistical. So then ego means somebody like, if I just think, I'm all about Tim, that's all that matters to me is Tim. What's in it for me? That's obviously not a good thing. So I don't mean it like that. But if you mean it in terms of like your individual identity, which is often under attack, a lot of what you get in very popular forms of modern spirituality and traditional is the message would be, hey, Laura, you're not really Laura. That's a kind of an illusion. That's just who you are in the dream, you might say, or that's who you. It's like, really, you're something else. Really, you've got this other identity, which you're already perfect. If you could just get rid of Laura, you discover that you're God or you're perfect or anything. I think that's profoundly mistaken. I don't think I want to go to you and to me. It's like, no, I'm really Tim and you're really Laura. And that's amazing. It's incredible. It's been 14 billion years of evolution for the universe to appear as Laura. And what you are is this process of evolution. So you're made of your past. You're everything you've ever been. And I'm meeting you and everything you've ever been. And you're meeting Tim and everything he's ever been. That's what you are. So that we're not trying to get away from ourselves to reach what we really are, which is this rather misanthropic, anti-human idea, anti-life. But rather, the challenge is to evolve further, to be more Laura, or to be Laura on a more emergent level, if you like, a more evolved Laura or a more evolved Tim. So we're flowering. Rather than trying to escape, we're stuck in this thing we need to escape. The whole universe is flowering into something greater and something more. And our spiritual journey is an impetus to do that on the level of soul, to flower into, to realize these greater possibilities of who we can be.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, because I can see a big difference between like my younger self and now my where I currently am. And I understand that, from where I am to like whenever, I'm going to be totally revamped because I'm a whole different person through all my experiences that I've gone through and my understanding of what I've gone through, you
And,
know.
and in that way, it's kind of like when you see the evolutionary picture of the universe, it's like the whole universe has done that. It's not just you and me.
Hmm.
If the current scientific model is right and everything points towards it being right, it'll change, but it's the best we've got by far. It's well, 14 billion years ago, after the Big Bang, the beginning of this particular universe, the universe is made up of gas, hydrogen, and that hydrogen is now you and me.
Hmm.
It's become you and me. Well, that's a hell of a flowering. It's turned into the whole of the physical universe. Then it's become alive. Then it's become sentient and conscious. And now it's on a spiritual journey. That's the flowering. And we are the leading edge of that. We're the, as far as we know, in this corner of the universe anyway. Who knows what's happening elsewhere? But right here, you and I, and all of us humans, are a particular type of the universe flowering. And our particular role, it seems to me, is to do with the psyche or the soul. That we're flowering into this other level. So it's not about getting back. There's not some cosmic mistake. This is not a terrible illusion. It's a more primitive level that we can evolve out of onto a more sublime level, which is why it feels so good when we do. And
Yeah.
why then the job becomes to bring that, to ground that sublime level, that huge love, for instance, in a world which doesn't have it. We need to bring it into it. And in so doing, we lift the whole thing up. And we are the universe now consciously evolving. Before, it just evolved, very slow. But we're doing the
Hmm.
same thing that turned hydrogen into life. We're now the next level of that, and we're doing it consciously. We can choose to do it. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the way the identity came in was more of the perspective is not, although we are real here, having the experience as our person, because at birth, we didn't come in with the name. We were given the name after birth, right? So we are, but we're the identity of who we are. I think people grasp onto that too much and they don't allow for the flow to come through, right? Because people get too much into identity and form, like they can't move past that we're forever evolving, right? And I think that's where that perspective came in for me to understand about identity and ego. Um, Not so much as like, it's all about me, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. The shift that I think is happening right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it will happen. I don't know how quickly, but it's a shift between the individual and what I call the univigil. And the idea of the univigil is an individual who has made the next evolutionary jump and is experiencing a universal benevolence, a wishing well to everyone, or a sense of unity with the universe. And of course, people have been experiencing that for on and off for hundreds of years. That's what the great mystics have been pointing to. But I think it's becoming more widespread. And what that does is it transforms your sense of identity, exactly like you're saying. So I want to go, look, you are Laura, I'm Tim, we're not something else. And the shift that can happen through deep awake experiences is when you go, oh, but I am the whole universe as Laura, meeting the whole universe as Tim. We're like branches on one tree. Hello, branch. It's like, wow, great. You've turned into a lovely branch. Well done. You've even got wings. It's like, we're rather than I'm just this little thing over here and you're that little thing over there. It's like, no, no, we're more than that. But Laura is more than that. It's not something else. Laura is more than that, and Tim is more than that. And Tim is evolving. He's absolutely far from perfect. Obviously, if you hang out with him, that becomes very obvious very quickly. But he is doing his best, or maybe not his best, but his best to do his best to keep evolving, because that's what we're in, that process of evolution. And that's a very different perspective than the one I had previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm on board with the whole we're all in evolution because that comes through my channelings.
Hmm.
And they say, everything that has ever been from the beginning of time up into this present moment, we are. And that was one of the channels that came in. So it was really interesting, when I found that you were talking about that, it
Yeah.
just kind of lined up. So, and then from this point, we have access to everything.
Yes, fascinating that you've been getting that, because that's what happened to me. I mean, I don't experience it as channeling, but it's probably got something quite similar in a way. I just get, "Ooh, wow, what's that?" and then follow it through. And one of those things is, and to me now it's obvious. It's like I look at this moment right now, and I see the forming. I see evolution. It's changing. I call it the morphing moment. Morphing is forming. It's changing. It's morphing into something new all the time. That's what existence is. But what's fascinating to me is, and this relates to exactly what you're saying, is that this moment contains within it implicitly everything that's happened.
Hmm.
Because if without everything that's happened, it wouldn't be this moment. So
Right.
without you contacting me and saying, "Do you want a conversation?" this wouldn't happen. Oh, without you being born, without the evolution of humanity, without the evolution of life, oh, without hydrogen turning into the universe, it's like that. All of it is present. So it feels to me that in this process of 14 billion years of forming, everything that is formed forever. The past is formed. We can understand it in new ways, of course, but it's formed. And then this is the moment where it is forming into something new. We don't, and then the future, well, it's formless. We don't know what it'll be. It can, it's open ended. It's genuinely creative, and we play a role again. We are the we are the same. We are the part of the universe which can create consciously. All the rest of it happened slowly and unconsciously. Now we can create consciously, and that's why it's moving so very very fast now. The level of innovation which has enabled us to be sitting here on Zoom is
Hmm.
extraordinary. It's going through the roof because we are the part of the universe that creates consciously.
Yeah. You explained that very, very well, perfectly.
Thank
I
you.
don't think I could have
Thank
explained
you.
it that well. And that's part of it is me trying to find the verbiage for this to put into like a book or something, so it's
Yeah.
displayable. But that kind of brings me to some of the topics that I got on like time. There's no actual time. It's like more of a continuum. And from one life to another life, there's no real reincarnation. It's an incarnation because nothing is ever the same. Everything is singular, and then from there, it kind of went into, I'm trying to remember, because I didn't write everything down. But like we can, like it's like our last life is like the highest level that we're going to attain in that life, and then the next life is from bottom up. And so it's like stacked, right? And they use a shelf image for me to understand like it's stacked, like life upon life, but it's never really a reincarnation because it's always a different incarnation. Nothing is ever the same. You can't, it's like a snowflake. You ever hear the saying, every snowflake is different? Everything is unique. Everything has a purpose. Everything is divine, right? So there's nothing ever the same. So our verbiage on reincarnation is not actually accurate. But so that's kind of like some of the things I'm trying to make sense of, you know, in the evolutionary process, how that works. Everything is just evolving from one level to the next. And going into, I never really got to, okay, where are we headed? And I know I'm talking about a lot of things here that we could break down because it's a lot of different components here. But like, where are we going? Where do we start? How does it all work? You know what I mean?
Well, let's do both. Let's start with reincarnation and then go where are we heading?
Okay.
Because with reincarnation, I don't like the word either. The reason I don't like the word is because it's a classic area where actually I think there's a lot of very very interesting information. The research in reincarnation, the university research is incredible. A lot of it, and it's just. But what happens is it's much misused. I see it, when I was growing up and I met so many different cult leaders who were like, "Oh yes, we've met in a previous life," and it was manipulative actually, and it's easy. Spirituality is easy to be manipulative in. That's why there's so many charlatans, and that's such a problem to see through that. However, I do think we should take it seriously. And the way that I've come to understand it, the word I kind of like as an alternative really is just continuity. So that I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth because you've had a near death experience. I haven't. But it, I've been around a lot of people who have. And it looks to me like what they're describing is, oh, I'm here having an experience of the body and the psyche or soul. And then I didn't have an experience of the body anymore. That just stopped. It didn't work. But I still had an experience of the psyche or soul. In fact, the volume was turned up and it was like super vivid and amazing. And, and we know that happens. When you dream at night, let alone having a near death experience, you lose consciousness of the world and dreams could be incredibly vivid and deep. And it seems to me that what's happening with that is continuity. So what survives death? Well, Laura does. Everything that makes Laura Laura. Makes Laura Laura? All of the past. Everything that's formed forever. This is now part of you. I will forever be part of you because this conversation has happened. Likewise, you, me. And what continues is Laura. And then what reincarnates? Well, is Laura again. is the continuity. Now, in that process, Laura will not have access to her memories for in the same way, for a bit at least, because, well, for all sorts of profound reasons to do with the relationship with biology. But it's still Laura, and all of that past is still there. So when you come in with all of that past, you just don't know it. And I'm sure what's happening, like with my 12-year experience, wouldn't surprise me at all if the reason I was looking for it and it was happening was some vague connection with, oh yeah, I want that. And then bang, it happened. And was that definitely what happened? Or was it just spontaneous? It could be either, but probably it's that, I suspect. So continuity, it's like the thing which you are, that evolutionary strand, just keeps going. And it goes through a phase here where it's being Laura and this body in this place in Florida. And then the body bit doesn't function anymore, but the soul bit does. And that carries on. And then you're in the realm of the soul ecology, experiencing that. And then for reasons, we can speculate about, it re-engages with a biological system. And then there's a new biological system with the same psyche. And it's experiencing that. And a human being is the coming together of those two. And that's no stranger, actually, than me going, hey, Laura, I've just discovered this amazing thing. Your body comes from your mum and dad. Really? No, really. There's a sperm and an egg and they come together. They create a whole new body. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. It's no different to that because it's just going, yeah. And that body, it comes together often with a pre-existing psyche and it forms a new system. And then that psyche can carry on in a way that it couldn't otherwise. And suddenly there's a naturalistic way in the evolutionary process of understanding all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And through my experiences, like you said, obviously I went into what they term the darkness, the void. And in there, I realized I didn't have a body because I was trying to look, and see what was around me, but I couldn't see, feel, sense, or, anything. And from there, it was, I was also recognizing that I was still me, right?
Yeah.
My consciousness, maybe not my Laura self, but I was still myself, right? Yeah. And because when we leave the body, obviously we don't have the name Laura. We didn't come in with the name. When we die, we don't leave with the name, right? It's just a name we have for this lifetime.
But really important to differentiate. I think a name for anything is like, I'm looking at my glasses. Well, my glasses are not the word glasses. That's just a way I refer to this thing. And the same with us, and so it's like the thing which the name refers to, that's real. That's what you are. The name is just a name. It's just a sound that we use to refer to it. And that feels really important to really get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, speaking of death and transitioning, we'll go in that direction, I guess. A lot of people will have a preconceived notion. Having said that we're still going to be the loved ones on the other side. So I know with near death experiences, they say I was greeted by my grandmother and blah, 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 like the image of them, but they're still relating to them as their grandmother. Now, if we are only in relation in life to that soul, soul to soul, right? On the other side, they're not necessarily actually the grandmother. They're going back to their true self, right? Their soul being, their consciousness, their awareness. Not necessarily we're going to continue that relationship there as we are here. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't agree with it.
Okay, so you think your grandmother in this life would be the grandmother on the other side?
I think that if you look, there's lots of, one can generate images of people now. I can generate my daughter is very much alive, thank goodness, but I can generate an image of her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's my image. So, of course, I could relate to the image of my mother who is dead. But also, I can connect with my mother. And my sense is that my mother is my mother. Now, she's experiencing something quite other now, just like if she'd emigrated to Australia, she wouldn't be here living in the UK in the same way. She'd be having a whole different, living in the jungle or something. It would be like, oh, you've got a completely different life going now. So it's definitely different. But I do think, see, the thing I would want to pick up on what you said, Laura, is this idea of you've become your true self. That's the shift I'm wanting to make and go, I'm not sure that's right. I think as we come into a more emergent level of ourself. So when I'm around death, and I've been around it a lot, I used to work with the dying, and I know a lot of people who've died, and that's happened recently. My sense is they become not something else, but it's like when I'm around anyone who wakes up for the first time spiritually. They're still them, but now they're like them, like, whoa, it's like the bud opens. Wow, look at that flower. It was always there, but now it's really come out. And that's what it feels like is happening with death. One of the things about the near-death experience, which is very common, which fascinates me, is the life review, what gets called the life review, where very commonly, I don't know if you had this, people see their lives because that's what they are. They're seeing themselves and going back to other lives as well sometimes. So you're seeing, oh, that's the strand of evolution that I am. So I think we do. I'm not saying always, but that we can connect with, and actually I think we can do it now. I think we're in a whole ecology of soul or psyche right now, just like the biological ecology knits us all together on the biological level. I think there's a soul ecology which knits us all together on the level of the psyche, and we're in it, and we're connected. I feel connected to all the loved ones I have who died, and we're there,
Right.
and they are them. They're not something else. They're not a true thing, and there's a very common, like I said, an idea of that we're really something else. So you get this idea. Well, maybe we can go for where we're going, because the idea that comes with that often is this Buddhist idea that when you die, you go back to the one like a drop returning to the ocean. And it sounds good on the surface, but if you stop and think about it, it's incredibly nihilistic. It's very anti-life, because it goes, oh, all those struggles, that dark night you went through, all the things you've had, all the things that have led you to become a wiser, more loving human being, it's all just going to evolve. It's all going to dissolve back into the one.
For
And
nothing.
Laura's like, Laura was a drop, and now it's all the one. I don't think that's right. I think I want to make a complete shift. I think that we are coming into contributing to something which is greater than us, which is evolving. So that just like at some point in the biological evolution, we went from single cells. Still, most life is single cells. But single cells form together to form a superorganism, a multicellular organism like my body, your body. I think the same thing's happening on the level of psyche or soul, that souls are coming into communion and forming a super soul. And we are contributing to it. And that super soul is what we experience as this great loving presence that gets called God. I think that's what I experienced for the first time when I was 12. And the key thing about that is that you don't dissolve back into it. You actually your life contributes to it. You are helping form it. And the analogy, just to end with, is, if what's the difference between my body as a complex biological system and a big pile of single cells like a slime mold? It's that a slime mold, they're all the same. All the cells are the same. But what makes my body function is all the cells are doing something different. They're all, and what I think is happening with this super soul is that we are contributing our individuality. You're contributing the fact that Laura is not the same as Tim. Hallelujah. Thank God for that. And that through that, your life contributes to it, and my life can contribute to it if we can tune in to this next level.
Mhm.
That's where I think we're heading right now. I'm not saying that's the end of it, but that, I think, is the latest thing.
Right. And I had, in my experience, I had something that was a good analogy towards that. And it was said as, it's like the bees to the hive. They're all bringing it back to the queen, right? Which represents the source or God or whatever you want to call it. So we're all like that, feeding the hive, right? So we're going out, getting like the information or whatever, however you want to explain it. But that was a scenario that they gave me to help me understand what you just explained. So, yeah. So yeah, when I was talking about like being on the other side, because there's just a lot of talk about like who we are behind here once our lives end, and just kind of wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more, because like okay, so we have multiple lives from my understanding, or that's what people talk about, is having multiple lives. Obviously we may come into another life after this life, so like we can't be like the grandmother in another life as the same. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
That's where
do
I'm
know what you're
coming from
saying.
with that.
So should we put it in the diary now to meet up in our next lives? Should we get it in? Okay, so let's imagine that. Let's imagine that in whatever time period, some future time, Tim's dead, Laura's dead, we both reincarnate in a different place in Iceland, and we meet up. Inside that being would be this moment. They may not know it, but it would be there. Just like I am talking to little Laura who took her first steps. Laura doesn't remember that, probably. I don't remember mine.
No.
But they're in there. All those experiences are there because I am my past. And in the same way, although now, and then you look at the whole reincarnation thing, you go, well, this is a really great way to keep evolving, isn't it? Because if I just stayed Tim, it would calcify eventually. But this is radical shift. So it's like, okay, take that essence, that whole, not essence in the sense of something different, but the whole of Tim, and put all that wisdom and experience in a new place with a new set of relationships. All those old relationships are still there, which is why I think quite commonly people do have occasionally that sense of, wow, there's something about you. We've met in a different relationship. But we're still you. But you're no longer, you're not my grandmother anymore. Now you're blah, blah, blah. And I think that's how we need to understand it. So there is a continuity, but it's in a whole new environment. But that's happening now. If we had met when we were kids, it would be very different meeting now.
Right.
Of course, I'd be much older, so it wouldn't quite work. But you know the essence of what I'm trying to say. It happens anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, and where do you think that we are going with all this? Like at some point, do you think there's an end, or is it just a continuing evolving for like ever? Or what is
I see no reason to talk about ends. I mean, it looks to me like um, we're in an amazing unfolding process, which has come a huge distance. I think it would be ridiculous to know where it's going to go tomorrow. What I think we can say, or I would want to say, is, okay, but what's the leading edge of it right now? Well, all of it's still happening from the basic level right the way up. But the leading edge, it looks to me, my speculation, my guess, is that we are individuals coming to become unividuals, taking the what it is to be human to the next level. And that's happening as we tune into something which is greater than all of us, which we contribute to, which is
Mhm.
this big us, this unividual super soul. And that's what we're forming into right now. That looks to me like it's the leading edge of the process. Now, is there something beyond that that I'm not aware of? Could be, couldn't there? Easily. Is there something happening elsewhere in the universe? It's a very big universe. Anything's possible. So I try and keep as realistically humble as I can, which is goes, look, based on the limited information and the limited ideas that I've been able to find in my lifetime, it looks like that's happening. And there's a huge amount of meaning in that. It really takes your life and goes, yeah, your life, Laura, is not just amazing because you're Laura, not just amazing because you're evolving and it's unique, but you can also, in that very process, you're contributing to something which is bigger than all of us. And I think that could be really beautiful. And the more you experience it, the more you want to serve it. And you do what you do, as I'm sure you're doing.
Mhm.
Because, and there's, in that, as when you wake up to it, the love comes from the sense of oneness, that you're not separate from everything or everyone. So there's a universal love. It's not just, well, I love my family because they're my family, and that stays, and that's important, but it extends and extends and extends. Now, you need evolutionary wisdom to know how the hell you live with that, because you're living in a very mixed up world. You don't want to be naive. But nevertheless, there is a fundamental wishing well, a universal benevolence. And that love is the thing which, well, like I said, I've just been running an event and going into that love. And when you experience it, wow, it's just huge. Just, it's like the difference between seeing in black and white and seeing in color. It's like everything just goes, poof, wow, what happened? And you're in a whole new universe, a whole new world. And the more of us that happens to, the better everything's going to get.
Mhm. Yeah. And so with the love, I experienced the love, of course, with the near the experience, but also when I came back, I don't know if you've watched my intro video, or what
No.
I've talked about on there, but I talk about having this, I call it an angel. I don't know how else to refer to it because that's what my intuition showed me of
Mhm.
it, whether that was accurate or not, but that's how it appeared to me. And the love that was just there emanating from that being, was just, it's immaculate. Like there's no
Yeah.
words to
Yeah.
describe that. But also at the same time, like I had one of the questions, and when what came to me was, okay, what is source? How can I explain it? How can I relay this? What is source? What is God? Or however you want to call it, um, supernatural or whatever it is. And it came to me that it's an intelligence. And that was how it was. That's how I felt it. That's how I intuited it. And it just kind of came to like this amazing, intelligence. So what is your thoughts on what is source or God?
So this is another area where if you'd spoken to me 15 years ago, I would have gone, yes, exactly that. Now I'm not so sure. So for me, I think that the universe has not come from an intelligence. I think it is the evolution of intelligence. It has that we're surrounded by systems that know how to be the ground, know how to be the plant, know how to be a human. And this intelligence is what's evolved. And that what we're relating to, that big us that I'm mentioning, is a super intelligence. And when you touch it, it is amazing because it's a super intelligence. So I think the essence of what your experience is, I completely relate to it. The turning things up the other way, what I think is the right way, is going, yeah, but that's not the source. That's what it's flowered into. The flower is the most beautiful thing you can see, isn't it? But it's not the source. The source is the roots down in the earth. It's a completely different thing. What you're experiencing as the flower is where it's all been going. And I think human beings, for very, very understandable reasons, experienced that big mind, that super intelligence, and went, well, this must be the source of everything. But I think we are now able to go, oh, it's not. The source of everything is something which I think the Buddhists were onto. and the Taoists, the source of everything is void. It's empty. It's formless. Something formless, which could form into anything, has formed into this. And the leading edge of it is it's flowering into this sublime super intelligence. What is the super intelligence made of? Lots of little intelligences, which is why it's a super intelligence. Think of it like a computer, and you plug them all together, you get the internet. Same, like, not the same, but, an analogy that as all of these different psyches come together, you're getting a super psyche, a super soul. So that's a very, for me, much more satisfying now. It was challenging to begin with, because it doesn't go, that just exists. How? Well, it just does. Where'd it come from? Well, it didn't come from anywhere. It just exists. What's its nature? We don't know. This goes, no, it's not like that. We can understand where it's come from, because where it's come from is just something which is empty of form. And then this is the forming. And the leading edge of the forming is the super intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I can relate to that, because one of the things that they gave me was like, we were like, on an octopus, right? So it's like us as a person, a human form, we are like the arms, the extensions to the octopus, right? So we're out there doing the work, the feelers, sensing, living life. And we kind of going back to, we're feeding the one source, right? So, but it's really interesting to try and wrap your mind around, or finding the verbiage for what is source, right? Because, and I love that you explain that the intelligence is like the flowering of it. So why, I know we feed it, but why? Why project into the human? Why project into
Okay, so
the
what I'm
tree?
suggesting, Laura, is that I don't think it is projecting. So that was the old model that I had. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very common model, and right now since I've given it up, it's become more and more popular. Ironically, because I've been playing with this model for 20 years, and it wasn't popular, but it is now. And that's the idea that there's a source that's intelligent, and it projects itself as the universe. I don't think that's right. I don't think anything is projecting itself as the universe. I think this has come from emptiness, and that everything has come from the one, and it's not one something. It's just one. It's something undifferentiated. And the first level of differentiation of forming is duality, relationship. Yin and yang, you'd say, if you were in China. Here we would call it the bit. Like what we've learnt is, right now I see your face on my computer screen, because we can know that from the bit of information we can recreate virtual realities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because I think we're mimicking reality, because reality has come from the bit of information, relationship, that very first yin yang. So that the Taoists or the Buddhists were much closer of going, no, it all starts from nothing in relationship to itself, and that's formed into everything. And then at the leading edge, there is this incredible thing. It hasn't projected itself as anything. We are forming it. So that whole process of ever greater, ever more, which is what evolution is. Something which starts very, very, very simple and gets ever richer until finally it's alive and it's conscious and it's psyche, and the whole spiritual domain has formed, and then this super system. And I think it's much more recent than people think. So that if you go back through all that spiritual literature, you don't find this idea that there's a super being of love until about maybe 2,500 years, maybe three. It's just beginning, but it really takes off about 2,000 years ago, where you get the classic statement in Christianity: God is love. It's a benevolent God. It's a completely new thing. God before that is judgmental, quite mean. It's a very different thing going on. I think because that hasn't arisen yet, we're dealing with something else. Then this arises. It's a new thing, because the whole process of the universe is a constant forming of new things. And so the problem, if you have it at the beginning, there's all the classic problems of, why did it do it? What was its motivation? How does it have motivations? I'm motivated because I'm Tim. I've got a history. I've got, I want things. Like, what is this? What's its motivation? How does that, what? It's like, well, but if you go, no, that's all nonsense. It's formed from us, and now it's us on the far more emergent level. So it's the best of us on a whole new level. It all makes sense, and it also allows us to go. The universe is so full of suffering, not because God was looking the other way or wasn't planning very well, or it's just mean. Like no, no, no. It didn't come from that. It's come into that, so that that beautiful intelligence is responding to the suffering like you and I are, which is why when you touch it, you feel this incredible desire to respond to the suffering in others and oneself. Because
Mhm.
it's the response. It's the love is the response to the suffering, not the source of it.
Right. Yeah, because and I kind of wanted to touch on that too. So with the suffering, my whole beginning of the awakening, going into the near-death experience, started with the dark night of the soul. Like it was this evolutionary process of going into like this state of suffering, right? And so from there, it expanded to the awareness, right, and to the opening, and then started my journey of what I'm on now. And so I think suffering is important, you know. Um, so what is your thoughts on that? Like, is it part of evolution, or like what is like your thoughts on purpose and
It's definitely part of evolution. There's no two ways about that. I don't think we need to suffer. I think we very often do. I don't think it's a mistake. I think one of the things which is often I see in spirituality is often the idea. There's two extremes. One is, well, you have to suffer because otherwise you'll never get there. Maybe. There's lots of different ways. And then the other side of it is that suffering is a bad thing, that you should be free of it. If you were really enlightened, you'd just always be happy, or you'd be free of suffering. Whereas it feels to me like suffering is absolutely part of loving. When my wife gave birth to my daughter, just in a room just over there, and she opened her eyes for the first time and looked into my eyes. My first thought, well, that wasn't my first thought. My first thought was, wow. But soon after, I thought, I'm in trouble because if anything happens to this little girl, I'm suffering a lot. But I choose it. I choose that because of love. I choose to take that risk, and so that there's a huge risk in loving, which is suffering. Also, if you open up to the big love, you are aware of the terrible suffering in the world generally, and want to ameliorate it. And you have to be careful because it can swallow you whole if you're not careful. And it's very big. And so that suffering is an acknowledgement of what we need to move beyond. It's like suffering in the body tells you something's wrong, doesn't it? Oh, I've got
Mhm.
pain. Well, that's telling you something's wrong. Something in the soul tells you something's wrong. And those messages can help you make it better. Something suffering in the world, in society, tells you something's wrong. So they're messages, important messages. And it spurs us to evolve.
Mhm. Yeah, because I kind of tend to look at it like, it's like a redirect. you
It's a
know,
redirect. Did you
It's
say?
like a redirect, right? So,
Hmm.
like, if we're going on a path and we start suffering, okay, maybe this isn't good. You know what I mean? And so we
Can
want
be.
to think and recontemplate and, take a look at our lives. It's a call back to our inner selves, right? Like the truth, the source,
It,
right?
it,
What
it
direction are
definitely
we
can
going
be.
in?
It can be for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of want to talk about, you talk about the two, right? Um, so how I don't know if this is the same thing that you're talking about, but when in some of my writings it talks about two, and I'm like, I don't really know if I grasp that. It's like there is the source or God, wherever you want to call it, and then there's the absence of. But the way they put it is like there's love and the absence of love and everything in between on different increments of that. So it's a stream of consciousness on all levels in love, right? And not love like I love you, but in the state of love, right? Evolving on a continuum. So there is this and then there's that. And if you're not that, you're this. So and then you can be anything and all things in between, like on that stream of consciousness. And you're living your life from that perspective. So wherever you are on that sort of say timeline, there's no time, but there's a timeline of aspect that you're actually being. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it came to me. And I'm trying to like work my way through this.
Okay,
You
so
know.
I'm not absolutely sure I've got it. I'll have a stab at it, but correct me if I've got it if I haven't got it right, Laura. I don't want to misrepresent what you're saying. Um, I would suggest, from what you've said, that that process of the absence of love to love, that duality, is the process of evolution,
Hmm.
and that we've come from the absence of love, but we've come from the absence of everything. It's the absence of any differentiation. There's certainly no love. That's the source, I think. The source is in the East they talk about the Tao, the flow of becoming. But the Tao starts; it's empty, and it becomes everything. So that the love is the big. That's the human state where we discover that incredible love. But then also the super soul, that big us. That's that huge big love that's arisen at the leading edge. So that's the sky, if you like, and the ground is the absence of everything, including love, which is why when you study matter, you know, you get into physics, you don't go, oh, look, I've discovered love. It's like, it's very cold. It's very mathematical because there is no love. There's no life. Not yet. It's amazing. Maths is amazing, but it's no human warmth yet. That's going to come much, much later, which is why we like it so much. And then that human warmth, that biological warmth, will develop into a sublime divine warmth, a divine love. And that's that that dichotomy between the absence of love and love is a description of the evolution of the whole universe.
Hmm. Okay. Is that what you were talking about when you were talking about I heard in one of your conversations like the two, or the one and the two?
The two. So I think if you look at like if you imagine something, if you imagine a formlessness that is forming, what's the very simplest? If it's come from the simplest things to the most sublime, what's the simplest thing? Well, the simplest thing is two, one in relationship with itself. That's the bit of information, yin yang. That's the bit in the computer, if you like. And
Hmm.
from that bit of information will come all the more complex information until you've got the forming of complex information systems, which are intelligence systems. The intelligence to be hydrogen, the intelligence to be all the different types of atoms, the difference to be molecules now. Oh, now the intelligence to be whole star systems. Oh, now the intelligence to be life, single-celled life, multicellular life, sentience. Bang, 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 bang. And all of that comes from a fundamental two-ness, something we could study with maths, the one as two. And that's still right here. It's like you exist in relationship with everything that's not you. That's the two-ness of your life. There's never been just you. It's always been you. You know, even when you were temporarily dead, there was always you and everything else.
Hmm.
Always. There's always those two. That's the two-ness again. Everything you see, you're discerning as it's this, not that. Oh, that's the computer. That's not the computer. That's Laura. That's not Laura. Everything you're discerning, all the differentiations, and the fundamental differentiation is simply this, not that. It's that
Hmm.
ability. It's and that discernment of the differentiations is what makes us conscious.
Okay. I think they're kind of, when they brought that to me, I think that's kind of what they're talking about, just using the analogy of love, the absence and the loves, and then everything
Yeah.
in between, right? So, um, okay, perfect. So with religion, kind of want to dive a little bit into religion here, before we bring it into a close. So a lot of people will talk about like maybe the fall or the opposing factor, like there's a devil, how would you approach that?
So I think the old idea of the fall is very much the mythological idea that I think we need to turn around. So not a fall, but an ascension, if you like, or an evolution. We haven't fallen from a supernatural state. We haven't got trapped in a body. All of that is an old understanding, perfectly understandable and hugely important in the evolution of human beings. But we can move beyond it now and see no, hasn't we haven't fallen from somewhere. We're evolving up into somewhere much more very, very much more positive. The other view is quite negative. And then with figures like the devil, to me, it's like what we're talking about is the less evolved states. So what we see as evil is often what was normal 1,000 years ago. One of the examples that I put in my book Soul Story, which is behind me, was Adolf Hitler. Everyone agrees, Adolf Hitler is evil. He did terrible things. Okay, I think that too. But if Adolf Hitler had done what he had done 2,000 years previously, he'd be called Adolf the Great, like Alexander the Great. Because at that time, if you could take over a whole continent, you were great. Okay, you fell eventually, but you were still great. 2,000 years later, we're not doing that anymore. And because we're not doing it anymore, that's not great. And that's what keeps happening to us. We keep evolving so that we don't do the things that we did in the past. And then the things we did in the past, which are still in us, when we see them come out, we go, ooh, that's evil, that's bad. And that's true of natural evils too, like ways that biology can affect us, which is not good. Well, so it's more primitive forms of evolution. And then the good is the most emergent form. When we see that, we love it. When we meet somebody who's able to really bring that into life, we go, oh, it's so lovely to be around that person, because they're helping all of us lift up a little bit further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've had people ask about Hitler, when I try to explain certain things, and they're like, well, what about Hitler? Are they going to heaven? They're still in that concept about, okay, the people that do bad things, are they going to heaven? But one interesting thing about the Holocaust, and I see it as you explained it, like as it comes up, not only is it like on a macro level, like we can see that, okay, we did this, we shouldn't do that. We're learning as we're evolving. But also I counsel people, and this was really interesting to me. I counsel people in the eating disorder population. And it was really interesting because I was overseeing one of the classes for one of the therapists. And as they were there, I could see that there was one person who had like exhibited this energy of like starving themselves because of the energy of the Holocaust. Now I was trying to think of, okay, is that a past life that is showing up in her reality? Is it something or someone from the past, or how does that all play in? Because it was showing me that that's the reason that it is emerging as an eating disorder versus having the actual experience. But they also say like everything is happening now. So is it actually happening now? Which you can go down a whole rabbit hole on this, on this topic. So she was exhibiting these because of something related to the Holocaust. So whether it was in her genes, whatever the case may be, how would you look at that?
Obviously, I don't know. I've never met them, and even if I had, I probably wouldn't know. It's not a particular talent of mine to tell those things, I would say. But I do think what you're saying is perfectly reasonable. I don't think everything's happening now. I think everything that has happened is implicit in what is happening now, which is different. And that will be true. So, it's perfectly possible that there's a past life connection. Also, though, the fact that it happened at all is affecting all of us because we're all connected to the past. So she might be picking up on that. It might be a social phenomena. But I think all of those things are worth being aware that they can be influencing what's happening now. The past affects us, and it's good to see. So those people, you may well be one of them, who pick up on that stuff. I think can be really, really helpful. I mean, I do think, like I've said before, when we pick on stuff, and one of the things I've loved, let me just say that, Laura, in conversation is, we're coming to an end. So I just want to tell you, I've really liked the fact that you've explored these things that you've picked up intuitively so openly. Because one of the things that I see a lot, like I said, in spirituality elsewhere, is that people receive messages, or they have intuitions, or they have psychic experiences, And it comes with this kind of like, no, you don't understand, I know. And it's like, oh, be careful. See it like a gift, which you have to discover what it is. And I feel like you've been more like that. And I really love that. It's been the openness. And so, yeah, that intuition, past life, that could be right. But in the way that you framed it already, you've gone, but maybe not. Maybe it could be this. And I think that's such a healthy way to approach it all.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to be open on everything. And the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is the AI because we are coming into AI.
AI,
Yeah, that's a whole different level of intelligence in
here it
itself.
comes.
And one thing that I kind of gathered from it intuitively was that, okay, the source or God, whatever you want to call it, is helping us bring that into fruition as a new consciousness, right? But not from a human perspective, because obviously it's not a human form, but it's also there, it's going to help us to learn so much more about existence through.
I think the last bit of what you said is without doubt true. It's already doing that. I don't know about you, but I learn from it every day. You know, it's my go-to source. I create with it. I ask it questions. It can find information so quickly. Again, interesting. Can't trust it always. Gets things wrong. It can mislead you. It can get things majorly wrong sometimes. So it's like the same old thing. It's like, you know, yes, it's really helpful, but be careful. Be willing to question. But it's already amazing. And it will, I mean, you know, for instance, the deep mind ability to do to do the all the protein folds, which is going to have a massive effect on medicine. You know, these are just gigantic scientific advances that would have taken human beings decades, and it's done, and that's going to increase. However, I don't think it's going to become conscious, and the reason I don't think it's going to become conscious is I think it's an artifact. It's not a living system. And the thing about a living system is it's made of other systems, which are made of other systems, which are made of other systems, all of which are embedded within this one evolutionary tree, if you will, where one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing, so that there's identity. My body's identity goes back to my parents, to their parents, to their parents, to their parents, to the right back to the very first cell, actually. Luca, the universal common ancestor. It goes back to that cell, and that cell goes back to the evolution of everything that made up that cell, and that goes back to the hydrogen, and that goes back to. So that's not the case with AI. With AI, you've got an artifact, which is we, who are conscious, have put together a machine to mimic our intelligence, but to do it on a higher level, which is very similar to a telescope mimics what my eye's doing, but brings it up close. Or I'm talking to you over the internet, which mimics me being in the room with you, but I'm not really. It's like that's what machinery does. That's what artifacts do. And because of that, I don't think these artifacts will become conscious. There's a very common idea in physicalist science that consciousness is a product of complexity. I don't think it is. I think if that was the case, the internet would be conscious already, or my phone probably would be conscious. I think consciousness is a relationship. It's a way of processing which arises with great, what I think of as temporal depth. The fact that I do go back to my body now, talking about my body goes back to my parents and their parents and their parents to the single cell. That depth is what allows this particular identity, this intelligence system, to be conscious. And that's a different idea about consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah. And I love when I got that, like you can use that to relate to how we all exist as a whole. Uh, because
Yeah.
like the information that AI or computers, it holds is very like the cloud is like that to our consciousness, right? Because it's like this massive memory system, which we can relate to like the cloud. And so I can see how they meant by you can use that to help us to understand our own selves.
Absolutely. And isn't it amazing? I mean, sometimes it feels like we miss what happens. It happens so fast. I mean, it's like when I started out, I had to go looking for the spiritual books that I wanted to read. I mean, I had to send away to India for them and all sorts. Now I just pick up this and I can have them within seconds.
Mhm.
We can talk about someone and we can go, oh yeah, let's find out what they thought. I mean, the transformation is extraordinary. I'm intensely optimistic, hopefully not in a naive way, because, and I'm optimistic because of the super soul, because of the big us. Because when you touch it, it's just like, yeah, there is a super intelligence now at work here, and we can plug into it, and it's going to go in a good direction. And whilst I think there are massive dangers always, and things can go wrong, it's not all set in stone. It's not predestined, and the whole thing could collapse. Western culture could collapse. It's definitely possible. But by and large, I think the signs are that we're about to enter a golden age because we have the technology with AI and robotics to take huge amounts of human labor away. So you and I are living these lucky lives already where we can do podcasts. Our ancestors had to work non-stop just to stay alive, and only for a few years, and bury most of their kids who died when they were still kids. All of that's gone. We didn't have that. We have the luxury of culture. And therefore, I've been able to explore spirituality the whole of my life because I was a lucky person born at a lucky time. The next generation, I think, can have that times 100. And what that will do is I think it'll be difficult. There'll be a huge transformation. I think people will be lost once work starts becomes something voluntary. Do you want to work rather than you have to work? But what that will do is it will set up an existential crisis because a lot of people find meaning in the fact they have to work, and then suddenly you don't. And that opens up this next level of meaning. And then suddenly the things which have probably dominated your life and certainly have mine become quite commonplace. So this evolution of the univigil, the next level up of the human being, I think the technological basis for it is going to be AI and robotics, and it's arriving any day soon.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we kind of got a taste of that already with COVID shutdown, right? So other people were looking for other ways to make money. People were stepping outside of the constraints of like, the rat race, have to go to work. And they were getting frustrated and angry that they were being locked down. They didn't have money. They didn't know where things were coming from. So things were kind of in chaos, right? So I think we kind of already had a little bit of taste of, where we're going with the work situation.
Yeah, it was disconcerting, that's for sure. Yeah.
So I think it may be a little bit worse before it gets better, but yeah,
I
no.
think it'll be both at once. Things will
Mhm.
get better and we'll like that. And things will also be very disconcerting. There'll be people who seem to be winners and people who seem to be losers. We need to take care of each other. Expect some unexpected challenges. But when that's happened before, I mean, I think back to the big changes like the Industrial Revolution, and it was difficult. And there were winners and losers. And a lot of things which weren't good happened. But overall, look where we are now.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Most of our kids don't die. We have a good chance of living into being 80 or more. This is revolutionary. And the level of affluence, even for the poorest, is beyond the dreams of most human beings. So, and what that does is it opens up what otherwise is a luxury, which is exploring the higher levels of emergence. Because if you're hungry, it's very hard to, if you're hungry or suffering, it's very hard to explore these spiritual levels. It's just not as easy. But if
Mhm.
all of that's taken care of, yeah. And I think that will bring in a new human being. And the new human being, the univigil, will bring in a new society. And so that society which has actually become much more compassionate and kinder than it ever was in history will take another big jump in that direction.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I see that like if all our basic needs are met, then we have more opportunity, the ability, the want to, the desire
Yeah,
to seek something else. Because we're not so focused on that, right? We can put our attention
yeah,
into spirituality, higher consciousness, awareness, right? And because we
yeah,
have that space,
yeah,
right? Because right now we're
yeah,
just kind of on a rat race.
yeah,
Yeah, no.
yeah. So we can be optimistic. not naive. You know, things can go wrong. Stay alert. You know,
Hmm.
don't be daft. You know, look, be alert. Things can go wrong. And the people that are going, look out, listen to them too. But do it from a place of faith in the human journey, that there, you know, that something really good can happen. And uh, it has, or it so far it has. So maybe it can again on another level.
Yeah, beautiful. And to end this, I want to kind of, because you do talk about everybody has meaning and purpose in their life. Can you share a little bit about that? So because
Yeah,
anybody who's going through this time right now, as we are going through quite of a shift,
yeah,
they may not feel like they have purpose. Why are they still here? They're struggling, things are changing. So what
yeah.
could you offer for that?
Well, let me first of all point people, it's probably a good opportunity for me to do that, to point people to my pod book. What I've created, I've written 35 books, there was enough books. So my latest thing was to create what I call a pod book last year, which is a series of video chapters. It's still like a book, it unfolds chapter after chapter, but it's me talking. Yeah, it's completely free. I'm in a position where I can give it away, so I've given it away. And you can get it on YouTube, and it's called Why Your Life Really Matters. And it's about philosophy, and it's called Why Your Life Really Matters because it's about purpose. And and before I answer that question, let me also just balance that out by going, but I'm also doing things around experience because it's not just philosophy, it's also experience. And I'm going to be doing more and more about that. And if people are interested, there's they can dive into the pod book or my last book, which is behind me, Soul Story. But I'm also doing a thing called the Univigils podcast, where I explore more and more of the ideas we've been touching on. But I'm about to launch something experiential, so look out for that. And if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, go to my website, timfreke.com. It's a funny old name, as long as you spell it right, Freke, Tim, Freke, freak.com. Then sign up to my newsletter, and I'll tell you when it's launched. It's going to be purely experiential. And if you want experience now, I run these events. So I've got one here in October, which is about soul communion. It's about experiencing that big love, that big us. It's very powerful, really beautiful. And I'm doing for the first time, I'm combining that with someone who works with ayahuasca in Costa Rica. So we're doing a joint thing. We're hosting it together in Costa Rica, combining ayahuasca and this soul to soul big love communion that I do. So there's all of that. And I have an online community. You can find out about all of that as well. It's free. You can join as a guest in which we have experiences together. We enter into those states together and we can do it online. We do it every Sunday. It's beautiful. Anyway, all of that's there. It's my gift to you. Anyone listening to this, it's my gift. Why does it matter? I think your life matters in all sorts of ways. It matters because of your family. It matters because of the contribution you give to the world. It matters because of a million things, on top of which there's this spiritual reason why your life matters, which is you are the product of 14 billion years of evolution, and you are an evolving soul. Death is not the end. You're going to continue evolving. And if you tune into that, everyday life becomes transformed. Like I said earlier, it's like going from black and white to color. And the highest level of that I have found, is that you're actually in relationship and can come into communion or oneness with something greater than ourselves, which is traditionally called God, but this God is the flowering of the universe. And you start to want to serve that. And there is nothing more meaningful. It doesn't diminish the everyday meaningfulness of your kids or your family that becomes more and more meaningful, but it adds on top this sublime spiritual meaning.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And where can people find you? Your website?
Yeah,
Can they
that's that.
contact you by email?
Yeah, you can contact me by email from my website, timfreke.com. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook. I have got such an odd name that you will find me if you Google it or you put it into, you will find Tim Freke. I don't think there's any others. It is actually my name, but people misspell it. So it's spelt Freke, but it's pronounced Freak. It's an old English name. And you can find out everything I'm up to. And if you do check out my work and my podcast, please tell me what you think. And if you want to be a guest member of my community, email me and I'll set that up, and you can come and we can talk in person. I've just launched a whole thing for my community, which is called the International Community of Unividuals, because it shortens to ICU, which I really like, because it's like I see you. That's the
Oh,
key.
that's beautiful.
I see you. And we do a lot of that, a lot of I see you. But I've just launched a little group on Telegram, the app Cat Telegram, where I'm interacting with people around philosophical ideas, so I can have an ongoing conversation. So we can do what you've just done. Yeah, Tim, but what about this? Yeah, hang on, what about this? And we can do all of that and really push it and pull it and develop our wisdom together. So all of that
Beautiful.
is available. At the age of 67, Laura, I just want to contribute as much goodness as I possibly can, given my own limitations, while I can. And so that's why I said yes when you said, would you like to speak to me? So of course, I would love to. And hopefully a little bit of goodness can come out from both of us having this conversation. Someone will be benefiting.
Yeah, you're doing beautiful work. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us here today.
It's been a great delight. It's lovely to meet you.
You too as well. Thank you.